Good morning. Gonna do 12 minutes of, sorry about the camera thing. The Recovery Bible. It's an NIV recovery version. And I'm just gonna start reading. Um, it's the first little chapter here is uh, the spiritual roots of the 12 steps, and it's by Tim Stafford. Uh, And I'll just do a quick little overview. It's going to give some background on Bill W. Bill Wilson, one of the founders of AA, and a little bit about Dr. Bob as well. We'll go into the evangelical roots, the 12 steps, and how they are connected to biblical references, and primarily about the Oxford group. So here's a little history, and that's how this book starts out. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. Um, The Spiritual Roots of the 12 Steps by Tim Stafford. Don't know who he is. Author M. Scott Peck calls it the greatest event of the 20th century, the founding of AA in Akron, Ohio on June 10, 1935. Two apparently hopeless alcoholics, one jobless for years, the other a surgeon who had needed a drink that day to steady his scalpel, had found each other. In years since, AA membership has grown from 2 to nearly 2 million. That's an old number, more than 20 some years old. AA's 12 steps, which owe virtually nothing to modern psychology or medicine, are unreservedly embraced by courts, hospitals, and a large number of counselors and psychologists. Beyond AA, the 12 steps have become the treatment of choice for a large catalog of disorders, from sexual addiction to overeating. Many who are not aware of the spiritual roots of the 12 steps, many are not aware of the spiritual roots of the 12 steps, so we are presenting an overview here. Bill W. was unquestionably the most influential person in the development of Alcoholics Anonymous. In 1935, he was a grandiose, loud talking New York City alcoholic. Nearly 40, he was feeding his habit by stealing grocery money from his wife's purse and sometimes by panhandling. Several times he had been hospitalized, but he always started drinking again, no matter what resolutions he made. One November day, an old alcoholic friend, Ebby Thatcher, paid him a visit. Thatcher was sober and had come to tell Wilson why. He had had a religious experience. Members of an organization called the Oxford Group had visited him in jail, where he had been incarcerated for drunkenness, and he had yielded his life to God. The desire to drink was gone. He said his life was changed. After several visits, Thatcher convinced Wilson, who was quite averse to religion, to attend a meeting at a Manhattan rescue mission sponsored by Calvary Episcopal Church, local headquarters of the Oxford Group. Wilson, though quite drunk, was moved by the testimonies and went forward to testify to his own changed heart. This change lasted less than a day. Wilson went on a 3-day binge and was hospitalized again. Thatcher visited the hospital and at Wilson's request repeated his formula for conversion. Realize you are licked, admit it, and get willing to turn your life over to the care of God. After Thatcher left, Wilson fell into a deep depression. But finally, while still in the hospital, he found himself crying out, "If there is a God, let him show himself. I am ready to do anything." What followed was a powerful spiritual experience in which Wilson felt overwhelmed by a sense of freedom, peace, and the presence of God. He never took another drink. Naturally, the new convert joined the Oxford Group, attending Sunday night meetings at Calvary Church, pastored by the Episcopalian Sam Shoemaker. Shoemaker was the best-known Oxford Group leader in America, but he may have made his greatest contribution through Wilson. Wilson would write, "The early AA got its ideas of self-examination, acknowledgement of character defects, restitution for harm done, and working with others straight from the Oxford groups and directly from Sam Schumacher, their former leader in America, and from nowhere else." That spring, Wilson went to Akron, Ohio, on a would be business deal. The deal fell flat. Broke and lonely, Wilson felt sorely tempted to drink. Desperately, he looked in his hotel's directory and called a clergyman asking for contact with the Oxford group. After a long series of unproductive calls, he reached Henrietta Sieberling, a local Oxford group leader. Wilson's first words to her were, "I'm from the Oxford group and I'm a rum hound from New York." He poured out his fear of falling and she invited him over immediately. She had a project in mind. For 2 years she had been working on a surgeon, Bob Smith, through the Oxford group. Smith was Wilson's opposite in personality, a silent drinker, stern and distant. The group had confessed with him and prayed with him, but his drinking had remained as uncontrollable as ever. The next day, the two men met, and they hit it off remarkably. Within a month, Smith took his last drink, and AA was founded. Soon, the two men had convinced other alcoholics in Akron to join the Oxford group meetings, just as Wilson had previously done in New York. The evangelical roots of AA. While the Oxford group, later named Moral Rearmament, would ultimately drift away from solidly grounded faith, they began with a strong evangelical identity. They tried particularly to reach up and outers by avoiding church buildings and traditional Christian language. Oxford group meetings were small and informal, emphasizing prayer, mutual confession, the importance of making restitution where you have wronged someone, and guidance in quotes. A Quakerish process where members sat quietly and expressed what they believed God might be saying to them. Guidance was always checked, in quotes, with other members. The group emphasized the importance of personal witness. Most of these emphases and practices found their way into AA. Yet within 5 years, both the New York and the Akron alcoholics split from the Oxford group. For the alcoholics, the Oxford group was too religious, too sure that they knew what alcoholics needed, and most unwilling to let alcoholism be their main subject. They wanted alcoholics to listen, not just talk, and to focus on Christ. Bill Wilson was developing a very different vision, a fellowship of alcoholics dedicated to helping one another stay sober through a spiritual program, a program that recognized no dogma, no absolutes, and was open to all religious persuasions, including atheism. For the Oxford group, the goal was Jesus Christ. For Bill Wilson, the goal was simply sobriety, period. The 12 steps. In the early years of AA, converts were few, backsliding many, but the recovering alcoholics, and Bill Wilson in particular, were dogged in their efforts. Gradually, they gained insight into what worked and what didn't. None of the alcoholics knew much about publishing, but they thought a book would be a good way of raising money and publicizing their ideas. Wilson began to write in 1938. His drafts were read and argued over by the alcoholics. So was the title, Alcoholics Anonymous. Published in 1939, it soon became known as the Big Book because the first edition was printed on such thick paper. The book has paid AA's bills up to the present. It has sold over 10 million copies and currently sells over 1 million a year. The Big Book reads like an advice column from an ancient Field and Stream. At its core are the 12 steps, which are usually displayed prominently at AA meetings. The 12 steps draw so broadly from Christian traditions that one could find parallels sprinkled throughout Christian history. The steps came directly, however, through the evangelical practice of the Oxford group. For simplicity, I paired some of the steps together. When he goes through all these steps. I'm just going to go over to the last bit of how Christian are the 12 steps. Clearly, the 12 steps originated in Christian traditions, transmitted directly through an evangelical movement. Conviction of sin, conversion, yielding to God, self assessment, confession, restitution, prayer, witness. These are all classic elements of Christian piety. The 12 steps are Christian, but AA is not. Under Sam Shoemaker's leadership, these 12 steps would have created a Christian group. Under Bill Wilson's, they make a group that has a wider appeal, for it takes on the pluralistic religious correlation or coloration of culture. AA may be unprecedented in this. It converted a Christian program of discipleship. Wilson detached the discipleship process from its Christian vision and applied it to a more immediate goal, sobriety. A number of Christians have attempted to re-Christianize the 12 steps by rewriting them, by using them in a Christian context, and by making clear that the higher power is Jesus Christ. There can be no objection to doing this. The 12 steps are a package of essentially Christian practices, and nothing is compromised in using them. In many parts of the U.S., the majority of people in 12-step groups recognize Jesus as the higher power. Yeah, in the U.S., but not globally. Even where this is not so, one can easily find an AA group more to one's liking. And most groups are genuinely tolerant. People can express their convictions without any sense of intimidation, as long as they keep it anonymous. The 12 steps penetrate every level of American society, including some where Christian practices are unheard of. At least one church cultivates an image of 12-step circles as a place where you can go to learn more about the higher power. The problem comes when recovery from addictions becomes salvation in some final sense. In the therapy group becomes a church substitute. You know, that problem is, it sounds like Tim Stafford's problem and Christian's problem. These last couple of paragraphs I have a challenge with because I'm a NA. But it's answered here. I'll shut up. The problem comes when recovery from addictions becomes salvation in some final sense, and the therapy group becomes a church substitute. The commission of a Lutheran church, Missouri Synod, making a positive assessment of AA, wrote that the spiritual awakening to which frequent reference is made in AA literature does not refer to conversion, but to a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism, however that change may take place. But that is not always the view of people in 12-step groups. A life-changing experience with a higher power may lead them to believe they have found God and God's people and can center their salvation in the 12-step group. The problem with that belief is that salvation is more than sobriety. Yeah, two different situations there. We should be careful not to be content when troubled people, and this is the we, evangelical Christians, we should be careful not to be content when troubled people are helped through 12-step programs. They may be awakening spiritually, and certainly they are being powerfully helped, but they cannot experience the full awakening proclaimed by the 12th step until they call the higher power by his true name announced in the Bible. So again, conditional. Jesus or nothing. For those who have already received salvation but still struggle with addiction, the 12 steps provide a recovery program that is consistent with their faith. As a result, Christians can experience their salvation in a deeper real-life situation as they allow Christ to free them from their addictions. From an official AA standpoint, the way people choose to distinguish between recovery and salvation is completely up to them, period. The unswerving focus of AA is to help addicts achieve and maintain sobriety, regardless of their religious faith or lack thereof. Yet because the 12 steps are a profound body of spiritual, Even biblical principles, they can serve as a bridge to a true Christian faith. Yeah, they can serve, but they don't have to. There is no must. That's my experience and my belief. So I'll shut up on that. That's way too much. Went over 12 minutes. Apologies. But have a great day.